Hey guys, in this video we're going to see if Blue, your Kanto rival, has a good or a bad team. Let's get into it. I start off with my Aerodactyl, he starts off with Driftim, immediately one-shot it with the Stone Edge. He then switches into Nihilego, I switch into my Gyarados, he sets up some Toxic Spikes, and then goes into his Abomasnow. I start dancing with the dragons right away, that snow's still coming down. I go for the Ice Fang, do barely anything to the Christmas tree. He sets up the Leech Seed, gets a little bit of health back from both that and the leftovers. I then decide to switch into my Arcanine, get the Poison, intimidate the tree over there. He sets up the Veil. I take some damage, he gets some health back. He then switches into his Audino. I go for the Flare Blitz, do barely anything, take some Recoil, get some lefties, take some Poison. I then go for the Close Combat, do a little bit more, but still barely hurt him over there. He goes for the Knockoff, knocks off my leftovers. Snow finally goes away. I go for another Close Combat, barely hurting that thing over there. He decides to go for the Wish, I take some more poison damage, and he finally switches into his Nihilego. I go for the Close Combat, still barely do anything. He gets his Wish health back, I take some more poison. I then decide to go for the Wild Charge, do about a quarter to the Jellyfish, finally go down. He sets up Stealth Rocks on the empty field. I then go into my Machamp, get some poison, get some rocks damage. He switches into his Scaledirge, I go for the Earthquake, do a huge chunk to the Gator. Get some lefties, I take some poison. He then switches into his Audino, I go for the Earthquake, do a little bit to him, take some more poison damage. He then switches again into his Abomasnow, gets that snow going. I go for the Dynamic Punch, do a huge chunk, get the confusion on the tree. Get some lefties and some poison. He then hurts himself in the confusion, I take him out with the Bullet Punch. I take some more damage. He then decides to switch back into the Audino, goes for the Mega Evolution, I go for the Dynamic Punch, do a little bit, get the confusion. He takes some damage from the confusion, I then take some more poison. I then go for the Bullet Punch, he just hangs on, snaps out of the confusion, goes for the knockoff, takes off my vest. Take a little bit more damage, I then go for another Bullet Punch, take him out. My champ then finally goes down to the poison. I then go into my Aerodactyl, he goes into the Scaledirge, I take a huge chunk from the rocks. He goes for the Terra Grass, I go for the Earthquake, do barely anything. He goes for the Will-O-Wisp, burns my Dactyl, take some more damage, he gets some lefties. I then switch into my Gyarados, take another huge chunk from the rocks. He predicts that, burns my Gyarados. I then decide to go for the Ice Fang, completely whiff. He slacks off, gets a huge chunk back. Then gets some more from lefties, I take some burn. He then switches into his Nihilego, I go for the Ice Fang, hit this time, but barely do anything. Get some lefties, take some burn damage. I then go for the Earthquake and take out the Jellyfish. I get my Moxie Boost, take some burn damage. He then decides to switch into his Frostmoth. I go for the Waterfall, do a huge chunk, but take myself out with Life Orb. And get that lucky flinch. I then decide to go into my Alakazam. Go for the Terra, Psychic, take out the Moth. He then goes into his last mon, the Scaledirge. I go for the Psychic, do a huge chunk. He goes for the Hex, takes out my Alakazam. He gets some health back. I then decide to go into my Aerodactyl, take more rocks, go for the dual Wing Beat, take out the Scaledirge. Good game. At this time I ask you guys to please like, comment, share, and subscribe as it really helps with the channel. Without further ado, let's get into game 2. I start with my Machamp, he starts off with his Squid. I go for that Dynamic Punch, get the confusion, he hurts himself, go for another Dynamic Punch, take him out. He then goes into his Alakazam, I decide to switch into my Executor, he goes for the Z Crystal, Z Kinesis, ups his evasion, but my Executor avoids the attack. He then fires off a Dazzling Gleam, does a good chunk, but I put him to sleep with the Sleep Powder. Get some lefties, I then decide to switch into my Aerodactyl, he's still sleeping over there, I go for the Double Edge, take him out in one shot. He then goes into his Rabombi, I decide to go for another Double Edge, knock him down to his Sash. He sets up his Sticky Webs, I go for another Double Edge, take him out. He then goes into his Ariados, go for another Double Edge, do a huge chunk. He sets up his Toxic Threads, gets the poison, lowers my speed. I take a little bit of damage, go for another Double Edge, take him out. I take a little bit of poison damage. He then goes into his Bolttown, goes for the Thunder Fang, takes out my Aerodactyl. I then decide to go into my Arcanine, get the speed lower, intimidate the dog. He decides to switch into his Jinx. I go for the Flare Blitz, take him out in one shot. Take some Recoil, get some lefties back. He then goes back into his dog, goes for the Electrify, go for the Flare Blitz, it's resisted now. Get his Cell Battery boost, take a little bit more damage. Take some leftovers. He then goes for the Thunder Fang, takes down my Arcanine. I then decide to go into my Gyarados, go for the Terra Ground, he goes for the Thunder Fang, I'm immune now, go for the Earthquake, take him out. Good game. Alrighty, let's get into game 3. He starts with Surreledge, I start with my Aerodactyl. He immediately switches into his Scissor, I go for the Earthquake, do about half. He goes for the Terra Steel, goes for the Bullet Punch, takes me out one shot. I then decide to go into my Arcanine, intimidate the bug over there. He decides to switch into his Surreledge, I go for the Wild Charge, do a nice chunk, take some recoil. I get a little bit of my lefties back. I then decide to switch into my Gyarados. He starts bulking up right in front of my face. He goes for another one, gets that attack and defense boost. I start dancing with the dragons over here. Go for the waterfall, take him out. I get my Moxie boost, take a little bit of life orb damage. He then goes into his Tapu Fini, gets the Misty Surge going. I go for the Earthquake, do a nice chunk. He goes for the knockoff, gets rid of my life orb. He then decides to switch into his Hawlucha, gets that special defense boost. My Earthquake completely whiffs. I then decide to switch into my Arcanine, intimidate the bird. He goes for the Acrobatics as a nice chunk to me, but Arcanine hangs on. He starts dancing with some swords over there. I go for the Wild Charge, do a huge chunk, but he's able to hang on. I get some of my lefties back. He goes for the Acrobatics, takes out my dog. I then decide to switch into my Machamp, go for the Bullet Punch, take him out. He then goes into his Gardevoir, traces my No Guard. He then decides to go for the Mega Evolution. I go for the Terra Steel Bullet Punch, do a huge chunk, but he just hangs on. He goes for the Draining Kiss, but I now resist that. Gets a little bit of his health back. He then switches into the Scissor. I go for another Bullet Punch, but Scissor resists that. He then goes for the U-turn and pivots into his Skarmory. I go for the Dynamic Punch, do a nice chunk, get the confusion on the bird. He gets some lefties back. He then hits himself in his confusion. I go for another Dynamic Punch, do a little bit. He gets some more lefties back. He then hits himself again in the confusion. Go for another Dynamic Punch. He just hangs on. Gets some more lefties. He then hits himself again with the confusion. Finally take him out with the Dynamic Punch. Terrible luck. He then goes into the Scissor. Goes for the Bullet Punch. Machamp hangs on. I go for the Dynamic Punch. Take out the bug. He then goes into his Tapu Fini. Gets the Misty Surge up, but eventually forfeits. Good game. Alrighty, and that's the video. Please let me know what you guys think about Blue's team down below and stay tuned for future content. Peace!